Look, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining us today on behalf of Konica Minolta and OpenText. My name's Jackie Williamson, and I'll be hosting this session for you today. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which we meet, and I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past and present. Just some really quick housekeeping. So we're on the Zoom platform. So on the top right-hand corner, there's Speaker View, which will allow you to see both the presentation and the presenters. For best experience, go to full screen. And if you do have any questions, please use the Q&A feature to load any questions that you may have, and then we'll answer those at the end of the session. Also, this session is being recorded and will be shared to you early next week. So you might know Konica Minolta as a managed print provider, but the world's been changing around us and we've been evolving as a strategic supplier over the last decade. And we now offer a plethora of solutions across automation, digitization, medical logistics, as well as intelligent information capture. And that is the subject of today's webinar. I guess all of you online know that the pandemic has forced many of us in business to accelerate our collaboration tools. And I guess it means we now know what we don't have. A lot of us don't have a single source of data truth. Governance and compliance is a problem, and also to make sure that the customer experience is as frictionless as possible. So those business issues are going to be, there's a solution being presented to you today which will answer those issues. I'd like to introduce you to our intelligent information management partner, OpenText, and Lee Gale and Bert Kelly, who will lead this presentation today. This is all about how content management solutions can help improve your collaboration and compliance and help you meet the challenge of a post-COVID environment. Lee, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jackie, and good afternoon, everyone. So allow me to do a quick introduction of OpenText and who we are and why we're here today. And to do that, let me paint the picture of, I guess the reality that we're now all thrust headfirst into. I think to say that COVID has brought to light the challenges that we're facing that were already in place before, we're already underneath the business landscape, and that is the rapid change that and the pace of change that we're now experiencing with Industry 4.0. As you can see from the introduction slide here is, massive amounts of data now characterize the operating environment that we're in, and it's growing exponentially. As you see here, 90% of that data in the last 2 years alone. And so that transformation is rippling across a variety of social, but also technical capabilities, whether it be cloud and being able to access information anywhere, whether it be mobile phone connectivity and the ability to consume that on any device, artificial intelligence, growing experiences of new people entering the workforce and consumers in a digital environment, machines being part of that digital fabric, security and compliance that underpins all of that. So massive amounts of change and massive velocity change as well. And so it's OpenText's view that this creates both a challenge, but also a big opportunity for organizations to be able to derive meaningful value from the information and being able to harness that effectively. And OpenText is a software and services organization. We are the leader in information management, software and cloud solutions, spanning a range of capabilities, from content services that we're here today to talk about, but also the digital experience, how we deliver that information to end users, whether they be employees, suppliers, or customers, the business networks and enabling frictionless commerce, all the way through to cyber resilience there and managing that risk and opportunity in your business. At the moment, we see three key challenges that organizations face when it comes to information management. At the moment, it's about how do we liberate trapped information from silos in the enterprise and enable new business processes and interactions. How do we modernize infrastructure so that we can liberate that trapped information? And so organizations can also benefit from cost as well as speed efficiencies from cloud computing. And lastly, how do we help organizations actually receive a return on their investments? What we do see right now with digital transformation, we saw it before COVID, but certainly it's sped up since, was that not all of these investments in innovation are yielding a return. In often cases, organizations don't know where to start and begin and how to do that to get leverage. So getting that ROI is quite key. And it's that last point that I want to drill down into here to frame, I guess, the conversation today. And that is that return on investment really requires trust and quality to be in the business fabric, if you will. Now, certainly from a trust perspective, OpenText pedigree is that, we operate with, the largest organizations around there on the globe. And I've just I had my motion detector sense I'm not making enough movement here on the webinar. So the lights go out. So trust and quality. Now, certainly this is our pedigree from a trust perspective and what we bring to the conversation with organizations. But I think the other element that I did want to make the connection there is, how do we collaborate in this new world and how do we enable that? Well, certainly trust really becomes that key factor that everyone needs. If the trust isn't there in the network, it isn't there in the processes, it isn't there in the interaction, consumers move on. Collaboration in today's environment. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Burke to take us through the rest of today's content.
Cool, thanks, Lee. I think everyone's pointed out, and we're stating the obvious, that it's kind of an interesting world that we're finding ourselves in at the moment. Obviously, working remotely, I actually can't remember when I was last talked to a customer when they were actually in their office. So everyone's kind of embraced this working remotely, whether it's been forced on them or not. And we actually saw that quite early on at OpenText ourselves. In fact, the part of the business that I'm involved in, which is a solutions consulting, so we help customers define solutions to solve these kinds of problems. We recognised, before we went into lockdown, that we could see the landscape changing. We were already, lucky enough to have a lot of these solutions deployed internally using all our own technology for businesses. So we went home actually really early, about 4 weeks before all of our customers did. So we were kind of early adopters of this new world, and we kind of see, that the businesses have an expectation that when they send their people home, that productivity will still happen. It's kind of an interesting little observation, but I don't know about you, but I actually find I'm, just as productive, but I'm a lot more busier than I was in the office, because people tend to, when you're in the office, they can see you. If they're busy, they don't interrupt you. But when you're at home and you have gaps in your calendar, people want to get in there to contact you. So you actually, in talking with customers, you tend to be very, very busy, which is stressful in its own right. So it's a really interesting world that we're in, and we're going to be looking over some ways that we can kind of improve not just the way we work. And as Lee pointed out, let's take advantage of this as an opportunity given to us where we've had to accelerate our investment as organisations into remote working capabilities, really to see what we can what we can get out. So, it's not surprising that at OpenText we see content services, the ability to deliver up and manage all of organisation, is really the heart of enabling this new world. So, Jackie and Lee touched on sort of things like, while we're remote, but how do we deal with compliance issues, security, access to all that information to help us make business decisions. So having solutions at the heart to drive this across all the business is absolutely key. So I'll touch on what we see as 5 key areas. We'll go into these obviously in detail, so I won't spend any time here, but it's everything from getting efficient and frictionless access to all of that information, all the way through to what kinds of solutions can we bring in to give us a much more leaner IT infrastructure. And it's not just as Lee alluded to around the move to the cloud and getting cloud services. It's other capabilities to help us make that transition a lot quicker and a lot easier. But first, let's have a look at the access to information. So I don't know how many of you have all of a sudden had to go home and all of a sudden access those systems that have been internal, they're not exposed externally. How do we get access to it? And if you're unfortunate enough to have which most organizations to some degree will have, where you'll have information stored on everything from maybe a records management system to a file system sitting somewhere, something to sitting into a shared drive. It's just spread all around the place. Going home and working remotely just adds to that challenge. So now all of a sudden you're having to deal with, how do I get access to it? I need this document for making some decisions. So it's all around how do we get access to all of that information in one place. And there's some key things that we need to look at. Obviously, having all of that information in as few or if possible one location, which allows us to apply all of our kind of standard procedures and controls across all of that. But one of the key things we see driving it is what we talk about, this metadata. And I'm going to go into it in a little bit more depth and why this can be both a blessing and a curse for an organization. But metadata is very important because it allows us to find information and associate that information, whether it's a contract, a standard operating procedure, a response to a proposal, allows us to find those a lot quicker. And then, as you can see in the little screenshot in the corner, it's really about delivering this up in a great user experience where people can see all the stuff that they have to do, all that information that's applicable to how they do their job comes through. So it's really trying to create this seamless access to information on that. So there'll be a few little quotes and a few snippets as we go along, but this is probably quite pertinent where we find ourselves with COVID-19. So as Lee pointed out, most of the top pharmaceutical and life sciences companies leverage OpenText technology to help them manage the research and development and things, manage all of that documentation and information around that. So they've as they've had to go home, they've still had to, very importantly, help manage all the medications around the pandemic we see ourselves in, and obviously they want to take all that information. So they've integrated their access to the information with their key systems and allowed their workers to get access to that. But as a part of kind of content, and it's naturally when you think about OpenText, you think about content management or enterprise content management, all those kind of things. We tend to call that just content services now because they tend to be delivered as a service, but as a part of adding, I suppose, the better experience, removing friction from processes and that, because at the end of the day, everything we do is associated with the process, whether that's in our world, it's responding to proposals. Financial services, it might be doing onboarding into a new customer, accounts payable, all those sort of things. They're all processes. It's how do we get information into those processes, start those processes is really important. So, in this world of working remotely, we want to digitize everything is the kind of the key. It's quite interesting. The first line, we sort of talk about, paper-based processes. Being in this industry for a very long time and working with technologies that have been around us, I tend to think of, everyone digitizes everything, doesn't it? Well, it's kind of not really the case. Just last year, working with a financial institution in Sydney, and they were completely paper-bound. Every process started with paper, either a report coming off from the Swift network to start a process, and just quite kind of eye-opening, really. So we've helped them digitize all their processes, capture that paper even before it becomes paper, to take that information, extract all of the data from that. And this is, remember when I talked before about metadata? So metadata is the information within these documents to pull that out, then we can make great decisions about it. Where does it go? What kind of security is involved with it? Leveraging artificial intelligence so that we can look inside those documents, pull out entities and categorization, some of the real meaning that's not obvious out of those documents to make better decisions. And then what we want to be able to do is take all of that information, start processes, and integrate it into the leading business systems. Because at the end of the day, as an information company, we spend all of our time within information systems. But if you're a finance company or you're in a finance division of a shipping company or energy, you'll be spending all your time in an ERP system and things like that. So we'll just talk about the idea is taking all of that content and all that processes, but embed it in the way you work. And that's a key kind of thing. So we'll just move on to the processes. So the very first point we talked about was the kind of frictionless access to content. So it's not just about the repository. That forms just a key cornerstone. It's really about the digital business that we live in. So, in my world, it's managing, product releases and things like that. It's managing RFPs for customers, but everything's around a process. How do we take that information into an organization, collaborate on it, but move it through the right process is all kind of key. It's the kind of way we look at this. And, as I mentioned, OpenText over the years has invested, a good portion of our product development into making our information seamless to the end user. So whether you're in, Outlook, or whether you're in SAP or SuccessFactors or Salesforce, is delivering that same single kind of repository of information into your leading applications. So you're not having to, we call it the old, swivel chair kind of thing, where you've got one application open on one screen, got to go to another application on another screen to try and find information. Here we bring it into what we call content and context. It's, if you're in a, in an ERP situation where you want all of those documents with the transaction information all together in a single unified experience so that you can make the best decisions about what you want to do. So very, very key for this. And then out of that, kind of those two steps, we're thinking about, the repository having all the information under one area so it's easy to find, managing your processes better. Then we want to look at around, how can we use this to do teamwork better? And it's kind of what we've been forced to do. We've been pushed home, I'll be the first to admit, I have to put my hand up, I actually love it, to be honest. It's not having to fight with public transport to get into the office. I'm much more productive around home. I still have access to all of that information and all my team wherever they are. And so, I'm finding it a great experience. Some people don't because they enjoy that kind of interaction. So to make all of our lives a lot easier, we need to be able to, as I say, foster great teamwork and collaboration. And a part of that, and also look at this from a compliance point of view in a minute, but really is how do we share all that information, not just amongst ourselves, but with our external customers. We want to be able to take that information. It could be a contract we're working on, it could be a standard operating procedure, and we need to work with our customers. So a lot of our customers in Australia are in the energy and engineering and the mining sector, and they tend to work with all of their third-party contractors, sharing design drawings and things like that. So what kinds of technology do we need to use to extend information that we have under control out to other organizations where it's completely seamless and completely in control? So using in OpenText, we have what we call OpenText Core Share, which is a SaaS-based solution delivered in the cloud that allows you to extend your content management platform out to your customers so that they can, they can exchange information with you. And if we think about a case where you need a document signed now, we don't see face-to-face. So Core Share is also integrated through what we call core signatures, which allow you to send documents for electronic signatures in a much more controlled, defined way. And all of those processes are audited and controlled. So a great way of kind of continuing these businesses. And we use these, extensively, internally. So when we're working with our customers and there's new contracts to be signed for professional services or for, buying new licenses, it's now just a seamless activity through Salesforce. Quotes get generated, all that information is garnered, processed through to our customers, all signed off. So it speeds up the process, and actually, from our perspective, it's actually made life much better. And so these are the kinds of advantages that we look for you to take advantage of. And the other one is, if we think about collaboration, we tend to think about things like Teams and Zoom and stuff like that. And Teams has probably been, I suppose if we look at the lucky one of this kind of the year we find ourselves in, they've done a great job. They pretty much give it away for a lot of instances. But if we think about access to information in the kind of context you're doing with it, Teams is a great user experience, because it's not just about what we're doing here, sharing information in a more of a video kind of sense, but it's all of the content. And so we've integrated our content services into Teams to such a way that if we think about what I've just discussed around business processes and gathering all that information, we can, from a content services side of things, when we get this information, it might be to start a new process. It could be a proposal or whatever. So we can automate that process from our end. So from the OpenText side, when we scan and capture this information, we can open up a team automatically, attach people to that team, and we can attach all of that content seamlessly within that experience. So we know that when people work on the documents, it's not hidden away in the cloud and the Microsoft world. It's in there, it's SAP, Salesforce, that information is available. And of course, when the project's finished, that you're working on in the teams, we need to be able to capture those as a record and archive those and bring those in. And we can do that seamlessly. And the key thing we kind of tend to forget about when we think about looking after documents is, what about all the chats? What about all the chats and the discussion around it? And we're finding more and more from a compliance perspective that people are needing to keep chats on whatever platform. So even if it's social media, WhatsApp, because they form part of decisions that you as an organisation make. So, but Teams and integrating that, really improving stuff has been, I think has been a great success. And just another quick quote on this. So there's a development bank, and they've integrated extensively their OpenText platform with Microsoft Teams to allow their organisation to carry on doing the way that they work, but remotely and not at home. So I've touched on compliance. Compliance is one of those interesting areas when, in our world, we can talk to, records managers and corporate compliance people. And for most of us, it's like, kind of get out of the way and let me get on with my job. But compliance is very important, because we live in a continuing complex world, litigious. There's a lot of compliance requirements, whether you're in healthcare or financial services, and we need to be able to make sure all that we do, and especially now that we're remote, work to what we want as a corporate standard and corporate compliance. And I like this kind of thing, like, let's go work from home, and then what could go wrong? Everything's perfect. Well, there's plenty can go wrong, and we want to make sure that whatever we provide as solutions to be able to allow us to, do things right. And the first thing, if we just look at each of these, just spend a few moments on here, is with the case, you go home and hopefully you've been provided with a good standard, corporate device. But not everyone has that. So if you are working on a home computer that everyone else is working on, we want to make that secure. So the kind of software on it that needs to be secure, but these are kinds of things. So say you're working on a non-secure device to get access to corporate information. And the other one, and we touched on it when we talked about OpenText Core Share, is that a lot of organizations have been very, very hesitant about embracing sharing services in the cloud. As end users, we tend to say, well, I just need to get my job done, so I do that. So it's a really strong sort of encouragement we give to our customers that they should really look at getting a solution and sanction it for people to use, but find the one that works best for their organization. Find one that is integrated into their content platform. So whatever security and processes and stuff they need to work on are controlled. But, it's just reality. People need to be able to share information. So make sure that, from an IT perspective, from a business perspective, that we find a platform that is, as we call it, sanctions. It's the one that everyone is encouraged to use. The challenge is and certainly what we're seeing is this, increased use of emails. So it's encouraging people to not use this as almost like a de facto content management system where you're collaborating on content, but it's sitting in emails. So it's not only putting your, finding it hard to get access to the right version of a document, which one are we working on, how are we collaborating on that, but just think about the burden that you're putting on the email infrastructure, all those extra documents. And I don't know about you, but I kind of don't really like it when someone sends me a 50 megabyte attachment on an email, big presentation. Not mention anyone's name, Lee, but that's there we go. It's just reality. It's an easy mechanism, but it's not necessarily the best way to do it. So having an integrated system, we can send an email with a link to that document that is available to you remotely. So we're not having to pass that around, but we have access to it. What about regulated information? So we're seeing this more and more. Especially in the financial services with the regulations that APRA are doing, but anything that is what we call personally identifiable information. And I have a number of customers that are working on projects at the moment where we're having to go back over 10 and 20 years worth of stored digital information and look for those kinds of information that we need to redact and protect. So find documents that have got tax file numbers in them, credit card information, stuff that's, we don't know until we actually have a look at it. So we need to be in a world where we need to protect this. And that kind of touches on that email. We don't want to send documents out with this kind of information. We need to understand it and protect it. And also, we don't want the way we manage and control information to fall outside what we call kind of records management, but it's compliance. While a lot of us, and I was probably guilty in the early stages about, it's just extra work that I have to do. If you do it well and it's completely seamless, the system should take care of that for you. So by working in a single platform, we can do that. We can apply all of the corporate governance we want to without any risks to the business. And lastly, it's, luckily down here, it's not so bad yet. And I'll sort of caveat that. As far as things like, the GDPR, the much more complex compliance, but if we actually have a look at some of the ones in the financial services, they're getting pretty close. And so it's the only way to manage those kinds of risks to the business is have all that information in the one place. And so how do we kind of minimize these kind of risks? So interestingly, we see probably one of the keys is actually education. It's not necessarily technology and everything else like that. It's actually educating employees, really teaching them about the risks to the business by getting it wrong. We as an organisation, on an annual basis, we have to, be, trained, and we have to pass kind of like the audit that we've actually done our security and understanding what personally identifiable information is all about. So education is really, really important. And I touched on very early on when we talked about metadata, about kind of gets in the road. We kind of understand that we want to go down and make it easy for employees to use technology to allow us to manage risk in the business. And managing metadata is one of those key things, because I don't know about you, but when I create a new document and it asks me to fill out the metadata, if I don't need to fill it out, I just go press OK, because I just want to get on with business. So what we, with the content services platform, we can introduce technology to do this work for you. So with our artificial intelligence platform, to be able to do, automatically understand the document that you've just loading up, understand if it's got personally identifiable information in it. And therefore, it can make automatic decisions for you, what kind of security to place on documents, where to be stored and things like that. So understanding that there is this, we want to remove friction out of our kind of collaborative efforts, and we look at technology that we can do that. And as we've kind of touched on it, by having a single content platform and embedding that into your business processes and giving people great experiences with that data is just a way to make that naturally a much better place to do that. And the last point is really find some kind of way of sharing with your customers and with your partners a solution that is what we call sanctioned, something that as a company that you know that it's going to take the risk out of the business because it's integrated well with your solutions. And lastly, we just touch on the point about having a lean IT infrastructure. Now, I don't know about you, but I was kind of struggling to think over the last 15 years whether someone says, "Oh, we're going to increase our budget." It never, in the IT world, it just doesn't happen. Even when before I was a solution consultant and helping organisations, devise solutions. I was an IT manager, and actually having to, my job was to not burden the business with additional cost unless it was going to have a direct, outcome to either the revenue or something within the business. So generally, it's you need to cut your annual costs. So how do we go about and do that? So one of the solutions that we look here is using OpenText info archive. So talking to a lot of customers at the moment where through either just the sheer size of the problem or not getting a handle on it, what do we do with all of those old legacy systems? So those old HR, those old ERP systems, which you kind of people say, oh, look, we just need to keep it just in case because it's got some important information on it, but the applications themselves aren't that important. So you're still having to look after it. You might be still having to pay, licensing and maintenance on it just to keep it around. But what we don't actually kind of think about a lot, and I was talking with one of our federal customers, they have quite a few solutions in this category where some of them, there is no one in the business that actually knows how to use the application because they've left, they're so old. So it's a matter about how do we protect the information inside that. The application itself is not that important. In fact, it carries a lot of risk with it because even if you put it on some virtual infrastructure, back it up, shove it on somewhere that you need to bring it back in a year's time to spin it up and get access to it, who knows whether that operating system is not going, Windows, the first thing it's going to do is go, I need to update. It's so old it can't update. So we need to take the data and the content that's inside that application, which is where the value is, pull it out of there and modernize it by placing it into a single platform that can handle both structured and unstructured information. We can now have basically a platform that we can use to, how do we get rid of cost out of a business? We can now use a single platform like that, get rid of licensing, get rid of maintenance, and put it in a platform that I think the biggest value is actually in reuse. So it's a cloud-first application, it's built with all the latest technologies, and it's an API services-first solution. So being able to integrate that back into your systems through modern APIs. So opening up some of that old data for new systems is also key. Just a couple of quick quotes here. The one on the left, which is probably the key when people say, well, do we get any money out of decommissioning old systems? So the Bank of Montreal, through an acquisition of another bank, ended up with a lot of systems that were just duplicates. When you buy the systems, it's duplicate HR systems, ERP systems. And so they had a very large ERP system that was costing them $5 million a year in maintenance and backup and everything else like that. So within 12 weeks, they had a 12-week process where they decommissioned all of that data into InfoArchive, turned it off, and so it was a way of reducing all of that cost and burden. They could then take all of that IT cost that was just going in maintenance, keeping the lights on, and putting into new ideas. And another quote an organisation from a ease of implementation. They were doing it the old-fashioned way, but on premise, but to stand up and deploy a new solution was very, very quick as well. So very, very key. But there are other ways that we can help you kind of reduce the cost and complexity in your business. And that is, all my customers that I'm working with, not one of them, actually, sorry, one of them only out of all the customers this year has been talking about an on-premise implementation. It is on their cloud infrastructure that they have on-premise. The rest is just, where are we going to stick it in hyperscaler? So we can, using our own expertise on our own products and with our partners, can, let us manage it. Partners like Konica Minolta use their expertise to deliver that technology as a service, because you want to be able to focus on things that make sense, right? Other stuff, running your business. Let other organisations take that complexity out of it, help you reduce cost. And as a part of that process, we might go through a modernisation process. If we think about decommissioning, we could do that as well to reduce the burden. But it's moving to the cloud, taking advantage of the economies of scale that some of the the large hyperscalers like AWS and Microsoft work on. So hand it over to someone that it's their bread and butter, and you can then focus on how do we improve businesses, what new systems can we build, and things like that. So it's just it's been a bit of a rush through, but these are kind of 5 key areas that we see as very important for you to be able to, in the new way of working, our new working from home, working remotely, And I think it's going to become a permanent way of life for a lot of us. One of my customers in the insurance building had to send all their call centres home, right? They've already invested now for them to work remotely. They've already got rid of all of their floor space for their call centres. So this is going to be, this is not, we're going to go back to the way we were. This is probably the new normal. So hopefully you've got some valuable information out of these around these kind of 5 key areas that we think will help you build a great, resilient organisation for, what next is going to come down the path. So with that, I'd just like to hand back to Jackie, and thanks very much for your time.
Thanks, Burke, for that. That was super interesting. I think for me, you commented on about content in context and, allowing your teams to collaborate both internally and externally. We've done some analysis ourselves, and across most verticals, education, government, construction, education, compliance and governance has proven to be a huge issue during this pandemic time, that people are realising that they don't have that single source of truth. They don't have the information at their fingertips that they thought they did have. It's amazing how many contracts and bits and pieces of paper are actually kept in people's drawers. So it is really about harnessing that information within your systems. And as you said, legacy systems hold a lot of cost. I think it's about 60% of IT budget is spent on legacy system maintenance. So releasing that information, but releasing the cost to actually do other stuff with your business. So look, we've got a few questions coming in. So let me just read these out to you. I think you mentioned integration with Salesforce or SAP. There was a question about that.
Yeah, so we have, with our content services platform, we have a kind of a layer over the top of that, what we call extended ECM. So think of it as a kind of a middleware layer that ties these two systems together, so that when you're in SAP or you're in Salesforce, and say, if you're creating a particular account, so in Salesforce it could be, creating a new an account, kind of a customer, it will automatically create inside the OpenText content services platform what we call a business workspace. And business workspace is defined to hold that information, so that anything that they then add as a part of that process, contracts, documents, whatever, they think they're sitting in their application of choice, but it's actually being managed centrally within our content services platform. So if a customer, and most of our customers have multiple platforms, if you've got SAP on one hand and you've got Salesforce on another, that information is shared with both of those kind of solutions. So it's both ways. Yeah.
So it really enhances the user experience.
Correct.
Okay, another one here. One customer has data stored on a premise and also on the cloud. So does the OpenText solution allow access to the content from both places? Yeah,
so by storing in content services, you can have, whether you on premise or on the cloud, you can access it from anywhere. So we're finding with our customers, whether that's out of the OpenText data center in Sydney or globally, depends on where you want to do it, or our hyperscalers, there's no restriction of you getting access to that data, because it's all internet first. And we've gone through a massive re-engineering project over the last 12 months across all of our products. And if you actually ever see OpenText product portfolios through all the acquisitions, it's kind of mind-boggling. But been a very big push from an architectural point of view to be able to now, when we deliver solutions, it's always cloud first, and it's always taking advantage of some of the new, what we call containerization technologies. We're moving away from the older virtualization, but moving more to the new containerization and taking advantage of all the orchestration we're moving to. So access doesn't matter where you are, but the way we deploy is now cloud natively for all of our solutions.
Fabulous, thanks, Burke. And one person was just wondering, with permission levels in systems, does the content management system allow access to data and resource based on current permission levels?
Correct. So all of the security that you would normally have internally, who has read and write access, who can create new versions, all of that kind of stuff is protected regardless how you deploy it. So it's the same kind of security. But we also have in our content services platform bit more of a dynamic layer as well. So you, depending on where you are, if you're connected to, say, the corporate network via VPN, you can understand where they are and you can allow them to have their normal permissions. But maybe if they're accessing it on their mobile phone or something on a device where it's not as secure, you might only give them read-only access to data. So we're allowed to, it can be dynamic as well.
That's great. Okay, well, look, thanks everyone for attending today. Thanks Lee, thanks Burke. I think there was some great information shared there that will really bring some value to customers. Look, if you do want further information, just go to the Konica Minolta website, which is konicaminolta.com.au, and you'll find the link there under home. So again, thanks for coming, and we'll have more in the Konica Minolta and OpenText series coming in the next few months. Thank you.
Cool.
Giving shape to ideas. Konica Minolta.